Wherever you're joining us from, we invite you to take a breath, settle in, and arrive just as you are. My name is Stacy Gunther, and together with Raja Kanori, our tech host for this session, I'm delighted to welcome you to Session 5, The Mystic as Researcher. And of course, this is part of the 2026 MSR Research Colloquium, the theme of which is The Mystical and Research, Dwelling in the Threshold of Knowing. And this was all organized by the MSR Research Committee. So we're very happy to have you here. And over these sessions, we invite you to engage research not only as an argument or analysis or evidence, but also as encounter, as a way of attending to embodied experience, inner voice, higher consciousness, non-dual wisdom, and collective inquiry. But before we begin, a brief technical note. If you experience any tech issues during the session, please feel free to contact Raja by DM through the chat, and he can help you. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our beloved MSR member, Judi Neal. As I prepared for the session, I was thinking about Judi, and three things really stood out to me that I want to share with you. She is, of course, co-founder and past chair of MSR, and she's also a flamekeeper. She is president of Edgewalkers International based on her research on Edgewalkers, which if you have not learned about Edgewalkers, you're missing out. I highly encourage it. It's fascinating work. She's the author of 10 books on workplace spirituality and transformation, and she was a member of my dissertation committee, so she is most beloved. So with that, I warmly welcome Judi and I invite us all into this session with curiosity, presence, and openness to what may emerge at the threshold of knowing. Over to you, Judi.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And Stacy, it was such an honor to be on your dissertation committee. And I told you and your committee this, and I'm just going to tell all of MSR, it was the best dissertation I have ever read. It was, I plan to go back to it because there's so much I learned from it. And I continue to learn from you. So I really want to honor you and honor the research committee and the just fabulous work you've been doing all year, but especially everything you've pulled together for this research colloquium. So thank you so much. Yeah, all kinds of hearts going up to you. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will be part presentation and a lot of dialogue in just a little while. So the title of this session is The Mystic as Researcher, and the topics I want to cover are what is a mystic, mysticism, and MSR, and spend most of our time, I'm going to share with you some of my stories of mysticism and research, and then invite the space for your stories, and end with some guidelines that I want to share with you, and invite you to share your own guidelines. Most of what I'm talking about with what is a mystic and with mysticism and MSR has been shared already. So this is more like just foregrounding some of these basic concepts. And as I start with what is a mystic, my simple way of doing this is to share some things about science and mysticism that people we admire have said. There are 3 different quotes I'm going to share with you. And so I ask you to use this as a contemplative practice as I share these quotes and have some silence in between, and then just see what arises for you in your own life and work and spiritual journey. This first quote is from Edgar Mitchell, and so feel yourself sitting in your chair, feel grounded, feel your feet on the floor. You may notice your breath, but do whatever is your practice to come into the present moment. And Edgar Mitchell, you'll learn more about him tomorrow during the plenary with
Marilyn Schlitz.
Say it again.
Marilyn Schlitz.
Thank you, Marilyn Schlitz. Somebody I admire greatly and just lost her name. She's the former president of Institute of Noetic Sciences. And she was inspired by Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, who had a mystical experience on his way back from being the fourth man to walk on the moon. And he has did a lot of work about science and the inner experience. And he said, we need to make the world safe for creativity and intuition. For it's creativity and intuition that will make the world safe for us. Take a moment of silence just to be with this thought. This next quote is from Ervin Laszlo. Most of you know Chris Laszlo, and Ervin is Chris's father, and spoke on the MSR Flame Keepers webinar at the end of April, which was an incredible privilege for us to be able to be in Ervin Laszlo's presence. He is one of the premier scientists who's done work on spirituality and consciousness. And he says, to find our way toward a better life and a better world, we need science as well as spirituality. Science without spirituality misses the intuitive elements of human experience, elements that many great scientists have valued on par with and even above reason and logic. But spirituality without science cannot offer a reliable guide for confronting the problems we face in the world. We need both science and spirituality, and we need them together, coherently and linked. The need is for a dedicated and lasting alliance between science and spirituality. Again, a moment of silence just to sit with this quote. And Einstein, who wrote a lot about intuition, says the intellect had little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap in consciousness. Call it intuition or what you will. The solution comes to you, and you don't know how or why. Stop this for a minute. I want to just briefly bring an AI summary. When I said to AI, what is a mystic? I got this answer, and it felt right to me. And I'm sure there's more to it than this, and of course, we've had many discussions throughout the day, and will tomorrow as well. But here's just a brief summary. It's a desire for direct experience, as Tom just talked about, prefer experiencing truth over just reading about it. There's a sense of interconnectedness, this undeniable sense that all living things, nature and the universe, are fundamentally connected. That's very much what Edgar Mitchell experienced, and that's very much what Marilyn Schlitz's research talks about. I'm hoping she'll share some of that tomorrow in her keynote. There's a value for silence and solitude, regularly seeking quiet spaces to go inward, to meditate, or simply to reflect away from the noise of the world. And MSR is really committed to building that in all the things that we do. Transcendent experiences, moments where time seems to stop. Anil, time seems to stop. Your ego fades, and you feel this overwhelming sense of peace and unity. A mystic has comfort with mystery, not having all the answers. and finding beauty in the unknown rather than fearing it. I think it was Deborah last time that talked about that experience of beauty. And then relying on inner guidance, relying on our intuition and on an inner knowing to navigate life choices. And I think that has lots of resonance for mystics as researchers. So here's just some quick couple of examples of our history in MSR and the field of research that draws on mysticism in one way or another. So Jean Bartunek, back in the 90s, she was a former, head of the Academy of President of the Academy of Management. So she published an article called Third Order Organizational Change and the Western Mystical Tradition. For those who don't know Jean Bartunek's work, she is a nun. And so she brings the Catholic tradition into her work, but all traditions. So not within MSR, but in the field, there was a best-selling book called The Corporate Mystic that talks about integrating spirituality and work. Val Konjursky, who has been involved in MSR, wrote several journal articles about defining spirit at work because she created a measure of workplace spirituality that, as far as I know, is the most used measurement. And things may have changed since I stopped following research so closely. Andre Delbecq, one of our beloved pioneers in the field, wrote a journal article called Spirituality in Business, and he, in that, described this course that he developed that brought MBAs and Silicon Valley CEOs together, and they studied all the mystical traditions and applied their learnings to business. My work on Edgewalkers, when I was writing Edgewalkers and interviewing leaders who had a strong spiritual life and were very effective in their organizations, I wanted to use a word that felt maybe more acceptable than mystic at the time. I started that research in the 90s, and so there's sort of mystical way that term Edgewalkers came to me, and I won't go into that at the moment. But that really what I mean there is shamans, mystics, the people who have central to who they are and how they lead the spirituality and the transcendent experiences are core. And then a very interesting book called Extraordinary Knowing by Elizabeth Lloyd Mayer is a fascinating book because she had her own mystical experience as a scientist in trying to find a lost instrument for her daughter. And she had her whole worldview so shaken by this transformation experience that she began studying with other scholars who had anomalous experiences, and then she used this book to categorize them, and that really helps to legitimize this way of knowing and being. So it's just a couple of touch points for our field. And then one of my favorite of all is Chris Laszlo and Fred Chow's book on quantum leadership that talks about us moving from a consciousness of separateness to a consciousness of connectedness, and it defines consciousness as the awareness of the mind of itself and the world around it. It's a powerful root cause of who we are, how we behave toward others and nature, and why we act the way we do, which is very similar to Tom's definition in the last session. And they say transforming our consciousness is the most effective tool we have for unlocking local and global change. And so that leads me to thinking this idea of quantum research. What if consciousness were our most important research tool? What would research methods look like if they came from a higher level of consciousness than this consciousness of separateness? I don't have the answer to that, but that's one of the questions I've carried throughout my years in MSR. And I hope, and we don't need an answer, we just need to be living in that question as far as I'm concerned. So tell you, watching time, just a couple of stories about when I was doing the research for my book, Edgewalkers. And I'm giving these as examples to prompt you to share your stories. And so while I was writing it, I went on a meditation retreat in Denmark for a week that was based on mostly Sufi practices. And I met a person there who was a composer of music for the King of Denmark. In fact, he was the only other person who spoke English, so he was my translator because he spoke both English and Danish. And he told me that he waits, when he gets a commission to write a piece for the king, he waits until the last minute, like the last week. And then in that week, he spends the week meditating, dancing, and sleeping. And the music comes. And when I went home, I had a conversation with my editor of Edgewalkers. It was in March of 2006, and I had been working on the book for 18 months, and it was half done, and it was due May 1st. So I had like a month and a half to write the other half of the book, and I tried to get an extension. He said, no extension. If you don't get it in, you don't get the book published. So I remembered what this fellow had told me about waiting till the last week for his music commission. So I spent that week dancing, playing my guitar, because that's kind of more dance for me, taking naps and meditating, and things started to happen. I'm going to jump to the third point there. I got this idea that when I was writing, that there was something I had read in a book about 0-point fields that was really relevant, and I knew I had the book somewhere, and I had bookshelves in that office very much like this. I'm looking all over for the book, and I can't find it. And then I was sitting at my desk, and something fell off the back of my desk. Some book that I was reading, and it fell off, and I went, oh, okay, and I go move the desk, pull the book out, and the book came out, but behind it was this magazine, which is really what I had remembered, not the book. And so it says, I don't know if you can read, 0-point field. That was exactly what I needed, and I was able to get over this hump of not being able to write on a particular point. And at that time I was talking to Patricia Aberdeen, who wrote Megatrends 2010. She's written other things around Megatrends. She was a dear friend, and I asked her about the way she did research, and she said, the way I do research is I journal, and my guides tell me what to research. And so, and she said, and I have a channeler who's really helped me and given me advice on what to research. So I got the channeler's name, called her up, and the woman went into trance, and I said, I'm trying to figure out how to get this book done in 6 weeks. It took me 18 months to finish. And the entity that she channeled just started laughing her head off. And something like, oh dear, don't you worry, it will just happen easily and effortlessly. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? What else do you want to talk about, that entity said, because that's the answer. There's no other answer. You don't need any other answer. You want to talk about your family? You want to talk about money? What other questions do you have? And they wouldn't give me another answer. So I asked the other questions. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, finding this magazine so easily just when I was looking for it. One thing after another unfolded miraculously. I decided to stop. You know how when you write, you edit as you go along? I said, I'm going to just stop doing that because I don't have time. I'm just going to let it flow. I'm just going to write and trust that I'm given what I'm needed. And it just happened effortlessly. On April 30th, I turned in the manuscript at midnight. That was my last deadline. 7 o'clock the next morning, my editor emails me. He said, I stayed up all night reading your manuscript. There isn't a thing I would change. And they sent it off to copy editors who changed 23 commas because they had different rules about commas. And that was it. So, so I would like to hear your stories, and then I'll have just 1 minute at the end that I want to share. All right, so let me wrap up with just a couple of simple guidelines that I hope aren't too simplistic, but that give you something to think about. And I would add to this list, I'll say that in a minute. First of all, really honor your calling. If you want to be living this path of mystic and science and research, honor your calling. And you may not always be clear about that, but I believe we're always given the next step. It's like along the path, if you're shining a light, you can just see where the next step is. You may not be able to see beyond that, but honor that, take that step. It's often risky, it's often counterintuitive for what would be a normal, successful career. But if you're called, then you know it and you'll follow it. To have some kind of practice. The practice that Chris Laszlo and Fred Chow talk about, practices of connectedness in that quantum leadership book. The last part of that book has in the appendix over 100 practices of connectedness. So if you're not sure what practice to follow or what practices, take a look at that and you'll find something that fits for you. The other thing is ask and you shall receive. This is something that the Christian Bible talks about. And if you're not knowing what a dissertation topic is, use that as a meditation question, or going to a mystic and asking them for guidance, or to go to Noctron's channeling session and ask her, and you'll receive information. Always trust your intuition and then verify. It's like trust but verify. But listen, the more you listen to your intuition, the more it grows. And then this last point of call on your community. You don't have to do any of this alone. You don't have to be alone in walking this unusual but progressive, creative, innovative path. There's so many others like us, and we build community as we reach out and find them and create events like this research colloquium, like the community in MSR and other places. It's bigger than you think it is, and we're glad you're here. So I will conclude with that. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Judi.
You're welcome.
I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank you for your presentation, Judi, for the provocative conversation, and thank everybody who listened and joined and participated. We appreciate all of you so very much. I just want to provide a brief highlight of what's coming next in the colloquium. The very next session, happening in 15 minutes, Molly Stilwell will present Dwelling in the Data on Grounded Theory as a Contemplative Method. And then we have Kathy Lundeen of the Academy of Management. She will present Ethical Thresholds in Spiritual Research. That sounds really intriguing. Our next plenary is with Nara, oh my goodness, Goring, who is presenting on native wisdom. And that is actually happening about 10 hours from now. So if you're awake during that time, you may be interested in that, but please check the program for your local times. And I put a link to the program in the chat. And we just encourage you to continue your journey over the next 30 or so hours. And of course, in between sessions, we're going to move people into the waiting room. So if you find yourself in the waiting room, know that you will be brought back in. So thanks again for your presence in this space, and we hope to see you at some upcoming sessions. Thanks again, Judi, and thanks everyone.